Chapter 11. Mysteries of the Orient. The fun and happy frolic of May Day was not over before I knew that I must go and live among these peoples. I was to perform for at least 1 year the duties of the Druid, the Bard, and the Ubate. My task was to tell fortunes by many ways, especially by tossing the 147 apple twigs, to counsel with the leaders of tribes and villages, to show by example and teach by concept the glory of God come into the form of man. After the ordeal, when I was at last handed my sword with a golden blade, I found I walked with a firmer tread, and kept my mind upon ways to ennoble mankind. Truly, I became in some subtle way a better man, but living among those simple folk in Somersetshire and along the River Brue, tasting of their daily joys and sweet loves would have made any man a better man. Their food was simple, their life was joyous, and they turned to me, the Druid, for advice on all things of the heart and the soul. Among them I found the true reputation of my uncle, Joseph of Arimathea. They called him the Man of Tin, for he came often among them to buy handicrafts, and most especially he bought any tin they had mined. His ships plied constantly from the Orient to Britannin, carrying tin and grain one way, carrying marble and fabrics the other. We Druids were taught to tell of heroic deeds by the knights of the Table Round, and their king, whom we named author of all, but whom the simple natives called Arthur, king of the Round Table. Into these heroic deeds we wove the story of the moral precepts which were inculcated by the Druidic ceremonies and studies. Each knight was given one of the 12 virtues which the initiate had been taught to strive for. The king, of course, who was but the symbol of the initiate. Merlin, god of the sea, was made into the worker of miraculous things, even as the sea brings on a sea change in all things, and he became Merlin to the natives. Sometimes for a few glorious days I could retreat to my rude hut on the Isle of Avalon, near the mighty oak beside Blood Spring not far from the River Brue. Oh, the joys that were there! I walked about the swale, keeping in my mind the hope that some day the most glorious temple in the world might rise on that ground, for it seemed so peaceful, perfect, and sacred. Sometimes I would let it be known that I would talk to a group of native Cornwallians under the boughs of the mighty oak, and many would come. Sometimes the swale was filled with serious-faced men, handsome women, and beautiful children, all fair and slender and tall. They sat to hear me talk, and sometimes for half a day I would spin the tales which taught morality and fortitude. Thus, in the place I had come to love most dearly, with the people whom I dearly loved, I spent most of my 17th year. Many came for healing in mind and body, and I healed. Though I was happy in my usefulness and popularity, I was lonely in my body and in my soul. For my body yearned for more than a thought caress of the golden girl, and my soul yearned for more than a hint of the existence of the white brotherhood and the order of Melchizedek. I yearned with a strange soul hunger for knowledge of them, for more knowledge of the things of the spirit and the mansions of the soul. Trouble came into my paradise by a line of Druid priests who came out of Blood Spring early one morning. They surrounded me without the usual salutation of brotherhood, and drew their swords. Scacus then came forward, his hand outstretched. "Give me your sword, the symbol of belonging to the Druids." When I refused, he took from his robe an edict of the Arch-Druid of all Britannin, and read it to me, his voice mean and triumphant. "By this edict I command Jeshua Joseph Bar Joseph, man of Nazar, to give up and abandon his symbol of, belonging to the Druids. I command that he yield it unto Scacus, the Egyptian, and I further command that it shall not be returned or touch his flesh until he has deserved the highest award man can possibly receive. Thus further do I command, Scacus, the Egyptian, shall keep this same golden sword and return it when it has been re-earned. And yet further do I command, Jeshua Joseph Bar Joseph shall leave this land before the sun sets this day, and this sacred land is forbidden to him until he has deserved to receive the golden sword." Scacus laughed harshly, and the ring of bared swords closed in upon me until I could not move for the blades. "But why? What have I done?" Roughly Slolzis grabbed the aord, from my scabbard. Then he shoved me over his leg and threw me to the ground, and my heart was heavier than my body. Within seconds, the Druid priests had thrown out of my hut the perishable foods, folded my bundle, and were marching me rapidly across the swale. We crossed back to Weary All Hill, then down the path toward the distant wharves. I was hustled below the prow of a ship on which I could read River Hindus, shoved across the gangplank with such force I fell into the arms of an Indian captain whose name, I later found, was Bomachari Ramanchana. Captain Ramanchana set me to my feet, but Skakus threw my bundle so violently I was almost knocked over in catching. "How violent are the Druids," Captain Ramanchana said. "But how wonderful, too," I said. Skakus heaved at the gangplank and sent it aboard the River Hindus with a clatter and a mocking laugh. "Why is he so hateful to you?" "I do not know, but perhaps I have deserved his hate." "Are you saying, Jeshual the outcast, that hate lies not in the actions of the active, but in the passions of the passive?" His slender face was neither serious nor smiling, mean nor disapproving. In his dark eyes there was no hint of passion, no suggestion of emotion. They were deep pools of understanding that mirrored back to me the essence of my own self. My assignment on the ship was to be officer's aide, and I reported directly to Captain Ramanchana. Before we had glided down to the sea over the same route as the Golden Girl, I knew he was beloved by all his men, and was a man of great development and high skill. He was not only captain but also spiritual healer and personal teacher to most of the men on the ship. He was in fact their guru, which means an adept who takes students to teach. So much was he loved that he never gave an order. His merest suggestion was carried out by a crew that vied with itself only to carry out his wish. The second day at sea, I dared ask if he would become my teacher, my guru, and teach me of the Indian philosophy. "I will teach you, Jeshual the outcast, with this agreement that you will take the first 3 of the 4 steps of our secret religious initiation as soon as we think you are ready." I bound myself by my pledge, and he began to open to me the strangest and sweetest mysteries of belief. The Essenes filled their teachings with mental and physical work. The Druids filled theirs with strain and terror and the triumph of the individual against all odds, but the Indians filled theirs with the triumph of the individual by passive acceptance of fate and the yoke of the supreme. The whole purpose of life, so I was taught, was to yoke the soul of man with the supreme soul of the universe. This could be accomplished by 33 paths, including mental study, perfected training, physical efficiency, adoration of the supreme, love of fellow man, service to fellow men, acts of devotion, and acts without attachment to the end result. There were special breathing exercises and daily meditations that were supposed to help speed this yoking with the Supreme, which was called yog or yoga. He who is thus coupled with the Supreme acquires many special skills, among them healing and levitation, and when he is advanced to adeptship is called yogi. Again, I was taught that God Supreme, the all-pervading spirit, was in everything and in every act. We Hindus believe that God is all and all is God. We are said to have 333 million deities, one for each breath we draw in a lifetime. But this is not enough. We have one also for each breath we exhale. For God is everything, even the breath and the used breath, my gentle guru said one night on watch. The problem we try to solve is, how can man unknow his separateness from God? How can he know he is God and nothing but God? In the many weeks before we sailed into the mouth of the Hindus River, I was specifically taught for at least 16 hours a day. When the guru was busy elsewhere, he turned me over to one of his advanced students, and they taught me concerning the subject he assigned. Never were there more thorough teachers, for they were taught, as a prelude to attaining a wonderful state of consciousness known as samadhi, to contemplate any subject to its uttermost completion and in the minutest detail. Thus, in my teaching, no detail was missed and no remnant was left out. The body, my guru said one watch night, the human body is the temple of the Supreme Spirit. It must be adored and cared for. Sensible exercise, sensible food, cleanliness, all are essential. But it is the mind of man that makes the animal body do those things which it must. Therefore, before the body can be made the pure temple of the Most Holy, the mind must be curbed like a wild horse to obey the bit. Once, when I came to him, concerned with the theory of karma, we had quite a long discussion. I began, "Karma, I was told, is the inevitable repayment for any act, and it holds through the cycles of lifetimes. That is, what I do or do not do in this lifetime may be caused by something from my most recent incarnation, and may influence my life a dozen incarnations from now." This is hard to believe, for if God is good, he must be just. What justice can attain to punishment for acts many births ago? Justly reasoned Jeshuao, the outcast, Ramachana said gently. But karma cannot be understood apart from the law of dharma. Dharma is the true and inevitable law of the universe, and all things happen according to the rule of that eternal law. Truly, he who would kill by the sword, by his very thoughts, sets into play the law of dharma, and the inevitable result is that he who would kill by the sword may die by the sword. It is inevitable that love shall be repaid with love, hate with hate, emotion with emotion, good with good, and bad with bad. Yet there is nothing good nor bad, but that the mind works to make it so. Dharma, when disturbed, seeks again its inevitable equilibrium, and karma is the resultant movement. But it should not be understood that there is no changing karma. Indeed, man can change his karma, else what is worship for? He who worships superbly well, who becomes an adept, who is a true yogi, that man is beyond karma. So great is he that he may undo the bad karma of lesser ones. Karma presupposes some maya. The adept has risen to enlightenment and the removal of all lack of knowledge. It is said in the Upanishads, our treasured teaching, that even if an adept should murder, it would not be murder, nor have sin or karma attached. I was taught the Hindu trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Siva. Brahma was said to be the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Siva the destroyer. But I was taught to think of the three as but one. Their highest priests were called Brahmins, or learned ones. One day, almost 5 months later, we sailed into the harbor near a city on the west coast of Hindu's land, and after we had tied to a wharf, my beloved guru sent me to gather my bundle and follow after him. This I did without hesitation or question, although my heart was heavy at leaving so many sweet comrades, as were the sailors on the river Hindus. We made our way by boat and on foot for several hours and rested overnight. Then we continued on until at last we stood at the entrance to the cavern of Elephanta, ancient and sacred cave of initiation. Guru Ramachana stopped and pointed at one of the small stone houses near the entrance to the cavern. "That will be your home. Go there and wait, and if the waiting seems long, look up at the lip of the cavern. See how it is worn by the feet of many who have gone before you. See the 2 giant statues that guard this entrance, so bare to the sight of God except for the jewels which they wear. 6 others guard 3 other entrances, each decorated with jewels even more beautiful, and those entrances are deeply worn. For we believe that within this cavern, 130 feet square and 18 feet from floor to ceiling, is the oldest temple in the world which has been fashioned by the hand of man. So old is this temple that its origin is veiled in mystery, and so patient was the love of man for its rituals that it is carved out of solid rock, supporting its roof on 4 massive pillars. Wait and contemplate the passing life of man and the enduring life of God. Wait and set your heart right with God, for many are called, but few are chosen, and many die before they come out from this dreadful ritual." He walked a little way and then turned. "Let this be my final lesson. You must be attached in detachment, and detached in attachment, when the moment comes. Though I love you, I may have to kill you. Though I kill you, I love you not one whit less." I moved into the small stone hut near the foot of the giant statue on the right hand of the eastern entrance. Each morning I found on my stoop cooked rice, fresh fruits, nuts, and sometimes rich stews of vegetable along with a pot of water. Each day at noon I walked down through the village into the river, where I bathed and swam, rubbing my skin with the fine white silt from the bank of the river at that place. Men, women, and children came to me with problems and for healing. Many times I was brought the victim of the deadly cobra, but in rare cases did they live. Since my clothes were not those of the region, they called me the holy outcast, and they sought my help and counsel on many of the problems of the village. Thus I spent 2 years and a little more until a note came from my guru which read, "Make ready, I have asked for you Shar Ashramim in one of our secret religions. May you live through them to attain equality with the gods." The next morning there was neither food nor water on my stoop, and a white cord had been tied across my door, a signal that I should not pass. All that day I waited past nightfall and into the night. The following morning there was a half gourd of water, about 3 swallows for a thirsty man. I waited all day and into the night again. Just before midnight there was the sound of footsteps outside and the light of tapers. A silent signal caused me to follow in the steps of the processional of priests. Ahead they carried the statue of the goddess Durga, and by this I knew it was the 9th day of the decrease of the moon. With much lamentation they took the statue to the river and let it sink slowly below the waves. After an hour of silence they brought it up again and began to sing glad and happy songs, praising God in the highest and spreading joy amongst all men. We went briskly back to the entrance of the cavern, and for the first time I was permitted inside. How can I say what I saw? Statues of gold, giant gems of ruby, amethyst, diamond, and jade, enormous figures with 4, 6, and 8 arms, each holding a bejeweled symbol. I was quickly bathed and then invested with the sacred zenar. We then made sacrifice to the secret sun behind the physical sun, and I was dressed in a garment without seams of any kind. Then, after a long lecture on the importance of morality in human relationships, we rested for a time to signify the closing of the first degree. It had been easy, but I was not unwary nor unprepared for the ordeal that came next. The garish began when I was enclosed on all sides by intense fires, and burning brands were held over my head. Then the sign of the cross was marked on every part of my body. I was cautioned to make no sound, and told that I was dead. Then I was sent to hours of probation in Pastos, said to be the doorway of Patala, and told that if I even moved so much as to blink, I should have failed the test. I was admonished to keep my eyes open at all times during the entire ceremony, for the god Vishnu would surely appear to me, and I must be ready to kneel before him and hold him with my adoration. I have no idea how long I was cooped up in that small tomb, for my mind raced outward to the past and to the sweetest companionship, the golden girl. I think it was a full day later that the small crypt was opened, and I was hurried from the darkness into the blazing light of the cavern. I was met by the point of a knife, and on pain of death commanded to take an oath in which I promised to be tractable and obedient, keep a pure body and a civil tongue, be passive and attentive in receiving the doctrines of this secret order, and keep inviolable and secret from all men the hidden and marvelous mysteries. The cavern was a mass of majesty and color. Each participant wore a pyramidal cap, symbol of the flame of the sun and the spiritual flame within each and every man. One hierophant approached me and sprinkled me with water and whispered into my ear, "Let this water make fecund your mother body, that you may receive the eternal birth from the virile God." When I was allowed to rise, a voice commanded, "Put off your shoes, that is holy ground." Then I was hurried to the very center of the enormous cavern, and there began about me a spectacular and gripping drama of dance and mantram. The hundreds of participants moved with flowing grace, and in intricate but perfect time, and they chanted a mantram as a song to the spiritual sun behind the physical sun. Almighty, indwelling, perfect, being greater far than majestic Brahma, is all-knowing, men bow down before you as the pure, as the prime creator, eternal God of all the gods, ever-enduring mansion of the worlds. You are the incorruptible being that is distinctly separate from all things transient. You were and are first of all gods, indwelling, and ancient Purusha, supreme cause of all the universe. You are the greatest mansion in the mighty house of eternal life. The universe was formed by you alone, yet I am you and you are me, almighty, perfect, indwelling God. As the gentle voices rose and fell, in cadence with movement, ever climbing to a climax, I felt a stirring in my heart that was both anguish and sheer joy. The emotional pitch was increased. I was placed in the center of the cavern and told to meditate upon the perfection of the deity and learn to pronounce his name in such a way that I would be given the ability to see into the future and bring to any man the greatest wish of his heart. Upon this I pondered while the ceremony went on, and I was deeply curious as to the meaning, for there was no name by which the Supreme could be named except perfected self. Before I could reason on this important concept, I was hurried to the eastern end of the cavern, where I took the part of the physical sun in a mime and traveled 3 times from east to west by means of the south. Almost exhausted, I was then placed beneath the statue of Sita, goddess of perfection, and the heavy statue was gently lowered upon my back. I became the Mahadeva in the mime, and was told that I could be free of the burden of my love only when with my mind alone I could shatter the body of the goddess upon my back. I began the circuits of the cavern, and with that weight upon my famished and trembling body, each circuit felt as if I had indeed carried the body of my dead consort around the periphery of the world. With each step, I took the din of howling, shrieks, and dismal lamentations grew. Wailing and keening rose to an ear-splitting intensity, and by the time I had circled the cavern 7 times, I truly knew the pain of all the world and bore the burden of eternity upon my back. At last a hierophant stopped me and demanded, "Say aloud, what 2 great concepts does this drama personify? Sita, known also as the Eternal Woman, is goddess of love and love of good. When she is dead, the whole world weeps, and there is blackness upon the souls of men." I was too tired and weak to think or speak more. That is true. Also, when an aspirant to the greatest mysteries loses his faith in the endless quest, he weeps ever more bitterly and knows the unspeakable anguish of the black night of the soul. Now say aloud the second concept. I cannot say, I do not know. That is true. You do not know because you may not know yet a while. But remember and ponder this, until the God aspirant can change the form of Sita, woman eternal, with the force of his mind, his love and his will, he cannot be accepted into the highest order, he may not step through the barrier between man and God. Watch now for the meaning. The statue of Sita was taken from my back and placed upon a golden altar at the south of the cavern. One of the hierophants strode toward the east and mounted a throne. All sounds died. Even the breathing of the participants was stilled, and my own breath ceased to flow. How long did we stand thus hushed in awe? Sharply the sound of thunder came from the roof of the cavern, and the master in the east suddenly was luminous with a golden light. From his head floated a slender tongue of blue-white flame. Slowly, as if with reluctance, it extended its arc through the cavern and touched the statue of Sita. There was an explosion, a burst of light, and the statue of Sita opened, and from her womb there came a figure looking like Sita but dressed in the manner of the Master of the East. I looked on, stunned, confused, and bewildered, for I did not know the meaning of this strange event, and none was given. Indeed, no explanation was given to relieve my fascinated mind. At the urging of a hierophant, I was taken through 7 fantastic mimes. Each told a story of special, moral, social, or spiritual value, and told that story in a way no words could convey. First, I was dressed to personify the god Vishnu, the Preserver, one of the many avatars. This avatar was that of the life of Vishnu as the fish god. The story told was that great Brahma was distracted or asleep, and the demon Hayagriva stole the sacred Vedas, without which mankind could not live. Without the sacred books for instruction, mankind fell into vice and universal corruption so great that the world had to be destroyed by flood. Only one pious monarch and 7 others were saved in a vessel constructed under the direction of Vishnu, who strives to preserve. When the flood was at its height, Vishnu changed to the Matsya avatar and plunged into the flood to seek and slay the demon at the bottom of the ocean. I was told to go into an enormous tank of water and bring back the 3 volumes of the Vedas hidden at the bottom, and was flung into the water. As I came up, I found the water was only chest deep, and facing me was my beloved guru. So great was my joy that I moved toward him in delight. Suddenly his fist lashed at me, he grappled me and bore me backwards and held my head under water. Surprise gripped me, and then terror, and then an intense anger. Suddenly, as my breath was expended and drowning was near, I felt the inrush of an enormous power. I fastened my thrashing feet upon the bottom, struck his hands from my throat, and grabbed him by the middle. With maniacal strength, I rose out of the water, bearing him in my hands aloft. As I gulped for air, I strode near the edge and thrust him into the air toward the hard stones. He was caught by a dozen hands and tried to get back into the pool, but could not do so before I had dived and found the 3 Vedas and brought them up.
What 2 concepts?
A Hierophant demanded. That he who would be as God must always strive to serve his fellow man, even at risk of death. Second, that things of God, no man can be your teacher or your priest. There comes a time when man must strive against the very ones who first taught him, lest in their love they destroy him. Next I became the avatar of Vishnu as the pious king Satyavrata, who as a fish warned the world would be destroyed by flood, and all men with it who had not drunk the water. Of immortality or rebirth called Amrita, a conference of great seers on Mount Meru, the spiritual mountain, could not produce the Amrita for men, but they discovered that it could be produced only by violent revolutions of Mount Mandar, the symbol of the physical world. But even the Devas could not spin the physical mountain, and Vishnu came to their aid. The serpent of wisdom Vasuki wound his powerful body round the physical world like a cable, and I, Vishnu, turned myself into a tortoise and took the world upon my back. It was then spun, the waters of reanimation or new life given forth. Tired as I was from supporting the heavy gyrating world on my back, I had to explain the concepts to the demanding Hierophant. First, life cannot be improved from the spiritual plane alone human. Life is improved by human qualification of divine energy. Second, agitation or emotional force is required to cause the human body to change the energy of the divine into a force acceptable to the physical world. The spiritual energy must be qualified by the human mind, agitated by great emotion to bring about curing of disease or raising of dead nature. As a third avatar, I was forced to charge into a lower cavern on all fours through passages scarcely large enough to permit my body. Here, I pursued the monster Hiranyakshana through all the regions of the 7 lower worlds. I did this as a boar, a form taken by Vishnu. We met and fought, and I was at last triumphant. Immediately I was attacked again by the brother of the giant who had been promised by Brahma that no being of any known form could have power to hurt him. I was placed within a marble pillar and caused to burst forth as living flame, defeating the giant whom no thing of known form could harm. Give the concepts! The giant of the passions of man burrows into the 7 caverns of his being and must be ferreted out and destroyed by the interned and relentless boring mind. The second giant, fear, cannot be controlled by any known thing but only by the destroying flame of courage. I was then taught to take 3 steps at right angles, representing the story that Vishnu became a small Brahmin and demanded of the tyrant Bali as much room as he needed to place 3 feet upon for the purpose of holy worship. The giant granted the demand, and Vishnu took a step to the east and a step to the south. When the giant came near to ask about the 3rd step, Vishnu brought forth a 3rd foot from his belly and crushed the skull of Bali. Tired as I was, I could not miss the meaning here. Bali was the tyrant of the physical mind, embroiled with the things of the physical world. The room to worship could be none other than a purified and holy body. The step to the east was the effort to acquire spiritual enlightenment from the glorious Son of Eternal God. The step to the south was the effort to acquire learning to support this enlightenment in the body of man. The 3rd foot had come suddenly from the belly and was used for nothing else than to destroy the tyrant. It must then represent the pure and undefiled will which conquers without struggle the physical mind. Almost before I had finished these ideas, a sharp sword and a strong shield were placed in my hands, and I was told that I must fight my way against all odds through the 7 caverns beneath the upper cavern. I was literally plunged into hell. The noise of combat was deafening in the narrow confines of the space. As I advanced along the corridor, I was attacked by many with mean and cutting swords, and was wounded many times before I could beat off or escape the fury of the combat. As the seventh avatar, I was the fabulous Rama, and had to prove that I wanted to be equal to the gods by doing what they had done, by undergoing the same tiring trials and exposing myself to the same dangers. Slowly I advanced down the deadly corridor which was stained with the blood of those who had sought to pass here before. At any moment I was viciously attacked and mercilessly set upon by many odds. I battled 7 times the length of the cavern and came to a closed door. Beyond the door I could hear the fury of battle and the cries of wounded, and it seemed that some were dying. Suddenly a hierophant appeared near me. "Hearken, you have fought the good fight through the 7 caverns of hell. You have outlived the illusion to reincarnation of the spirit of the avatar in human flesh. You have seen the 7 places of reward and of punishment which the many nations have taken into their creeds, for it should be clear that the supreme abode contains many mansions which are but degrees of reward made proportional to the measure of man's faith and obedience. Now, one last act of faith and obedience must lead you to Kailasa, or to sure and certain death. You are instructed to go through this door." In the blink of an eye he was gone. I stood panting, fatigued beyond all feeling, drugged by the weight of my bones and muscles. I heard behind me the urgent whispering voice of my guru. He came up to me out of the corridor and seized me firmly and desperately. "They have gone mad," he whispered. 2 factions are now battling and killing each other because one says you should never have been made to suffer the 4 initiations at one time and should be let out of the final battle because you are consumed and impotent with strain and fatigue. The other will battle to death to see that no initiation is ever interrupted. If you wish, I can guide you to another way and you will not have to face the task beyond this door." He pointed to the left, where a narrow corridor led upward to a turn, and I could see the deep purple of a royal-colored door. He stood back and left the decision totally to me. Could I escape the final trial? Could I survive it if I did not escape? Was he truthful, or was the Hierophant right? I could not decide, but in my confusion I felt the urge to go through the door ahead. Yielding to that pull, I flung open the door and leaped up an incline, turned hard left, and raced on. Suddenly I stopped, sword at ready, and crouched behind my shield. My eyes were fixed upon the juggernaut before me, and I was unable to draw my attention from it, although around me there was the furious sound of combat. For the juggernaut, a wheel of stone, was poised at the top of a steep incline running straight down between stone walls to the purple door. It was stopped only by a hinged lever which was attached to the frame of the purple door. Had I pulled open that door, the trigger would have released the stop, and the enormous stone crashed down the narrow passage with an irresistible force and speed. A horrible death would have been almost certain beneath that massive stone. Above the purple door was a simple sign that made clear every concept of the initiation: choose duty or you choose death. Dimly in the recesses of my tired mind, I noticed that the sounds of battle had died away. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the cavern. "Whatever is done without firm faith, whether it be sacrifice or service to man, fasting or purity for God, or duty to one's assigned task, the results are not for this world nor for heaven." Even as I was groping with the enormity of the message, I heard the tolling of a lovely bell. I stumbled toward it and burst through doors to the sound of a conch. Suddenly, I was in an apartment of the cavern so brightly lighted that it seemed more brilliant than day. Within my sight were beautiful statues, rich with gold and jewels. The pillars were covered with plates of gold, set with stones of fantastic price, and from the open bellies of gold and silver statues flowed rivers of diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and pearls. Through all this, and through the rich vestments of the priests and hierophants, my eyes were drawn directly to the sacred adytum and the simple marble altar. It was flanked by twin pyramids from whose tops fires blazed, and upon the marble lay a single perfect golden lotus. Perfume touched my being with a new dimension of emotional experience, for the fires were of incense. I stood utterly struck immobile, and then the most amazing thing happened before my eyes. My tired heart seemed to stop, to swell until it reached the bursting point. It then exploded upward and shattered the base of my brain, but I was too tired and too moved to feel or to care what I felt. Then there rose out of my physical flesh a radiant form. It moved from me to hover over the 4 petals of the lotus. There it stood, and I could see my ragged and bleeding physical self looking through haggard and hungry eyes at my radiant form hovering over the golden lotus. I was in 2 places at the same instant. I was myself, my flesh self. I was also some radiant body able to travel through space and see as with physical eyes. Oh, the joy that flooded through my being. I understood then the story. Told of Brahma! When Brahma assumed mortal form, from one half of his divine being was born Satarupa, a goddess so beautiful that Brahma fell instantly in love with her. But since he deemed her his daughter, he was ashamed of his passion, and in his conflict between love and shame, he stood motionless. The goddess saw his quandary and stepped aside from his desiring gaze. But suddenly a face appeared to gaze upon her, though Brahma did not move. Dutifully she stepped aside again, but another face appeared. Yet a 4th face appeared, so that Brahma could look upon the perfect beauty of his thought-born goddess at all times and in all directions. Magic music ran through my nerves. I understood the symbol of the lotus. It was said to be the symbol of the soul's freedom when liberated from the earthly body. The lotus takes root in the mud, grows by degrees from germ to perfect plant, and then rises proudly above the water, floating in air as if independent of any outside aid. The lotus of my radiant self was now floating above its own golden symbol, and every cell of my body was filled with light, music, and the fragrance of perfected life. In this divine moment, I was certain that the Supreme God and the Supreme Universe were one, without beginning and without end, and that God was omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, and I was part of, yet not separate from, the Godhead. I knew that I was immortal and had existed since time began, and had been reincarnated through 1,000 forms, even as had every other man upon earth. I knew in that exultant moment that man could choose the habitat of his soul, that he could change his abode as one throws away old garments, that he could quit the old mortal frame and enter into others that were new or more perfectly purified and made useful. I knew, too, that at the last, man who was sufficiently trained and purified could be physically absorbed into the eternal. During all of these thoughts, I knew the most supreme bliss. Guru Ramanchana appeared at my side. I could see him from 2 sides. I could see his front, facing the golden lotus. I could see his left side facing my bleeding and battered form. I saw upon his face the look of reflected glory, the momentarily recaptured perfect bliss which he must have been able to know upon his initiation into this advanced and secret training of the Hindus. Though he had tricked me and fought with me, and had almost been my death, yet at that moment I loved him more than anyone upon earth, even more than my own self. I knew that, but for his dedication and love of me, his willingness to risk my ruin or my illumination, I could never have come so swiftly to this magnificent moment of sheer delight. Then the magic moment passed. Someone moved, and my radiant body slammed back into my physical body with a force that jerked my frame and almost threw me to the stones. My body tingled all over as if it had been asleep and was now awakening to the flowing of new blood and new life. It was then I felt the blow and heard the sound at the back of my head, as if someone had struck my neck with a light club. But I knew it was caused moments before, when my radiant body had surged out of my physical body. Only when the nerves and the tendons were again awakened from the stillness which was like unto death, when the muscles of the body became a stone. Only then could the physical sensation be brought to consciousness. Only then could the full beauty, the full bliss, the full significance be recognized by the physical brain. My beloved Guru took my hand and led me gently to a high throne. There I was enfolded in the embrace of each of the mighty Hierophants and given the secret and sacred name of God. It was the mantram Om, said in my mother tone with mind and body perfectly composed. I was told that any time I said this word, the world would be shaken to its foundation and all the gods would hurry to obey. Then I was bathed in curing ointments, robed in magnificent clothes, rich and stiff with fabulous jewels. I was offered the sacred cord and the jewel of the Master of the East, provided I would go forth for a year and teach. I would go forth for a year and teach among the people of Hindusland. I was then called twice born and thrice born, and urged to go teach the glory of the One. But my guru asked that I be given 15 days to rest and think, and this was granted. When at last the ceremony was over, I stumbled to my cell. I was so tired that I fell over the low stoop. There beside my bundle was a great variety of tempting and delicious foods, looking colorful and bright in the morning sun. But I ate only a little before I fell asleep. I waked to remember the magnificent moment, to eat a little more, and to look at my cuts. But soon I was asleep again. When I fully waked, 3 days later, my wounds and gashes had all healed without a scar of any kind. Then I sat down to food of the body that was plentiful and a delight, but I knew that nothing could equal the food of the soul I had known in the moment of magnificence when my radiant body floated like the many-eyed Brahma above the golden lotus in the cavern of Elephanta. The mystery of the master who changed the form of Sita with his mind was fresh and keen, and I pondered much. But even that lack of knowing could not dim the memory of the glorious moment when I became one with the universe and all men. How I longed to reach that moment of bliss again, and how long I was, perforce, to wait.